Danish Gambit is considered one of the best gambits in the world of chess. So today we are going to cover the complete Danish Gambit played from the white side. So without wasting any further minute, let's jump right into the video. But before starting the video, I'm having a request to all of you. If you are new to our channel, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. It is just free for you, but it helps us to motivate and make videos like this. So let's quickly jump right into the opening, the gambit, the Danish Gambit. We play the move e4. Our opponent plays the move f4. Here there are many ways to continue the game. You can play the move f4, the King's Gambit. You can play the move knight f3, the standard Italian or Gocciano. But we play the move d4, allowing our opponent to capture, and now playing the move c3, allowing our opponent to again capture the pawn on c3, and now developing the piece on bishop to c4, allowing our opponent to capture the third pawn on b2, and finally we recapture. After landing in this position, we are solid 2 pawns down, but in the exchange, we got the development advantage. We have already developed 2 minor pieces, the bishops. They are just long ranges pieces, and we just need one more move to develop our development, and we are going to simply castle up, and the game is going to be very interesting. So after bishop into b2, I have covered 4 main variations in this opening. d6, bishop to b4 check, knight to f6 attacking the pawn on e4, and playing the move queen to g5 attacking the pawn on g2. All the 4 moves are the most natural playing moves and have been played in their mega database. So first start with queen g5, the dubious one. After queen g5, black is preparing to capture the pawn on g2. So we develop our knight to f3, simply ignoring black's threat and allowing blacks to capture the pawn on g2. And after queen g2, we have sacrificed 3 pawns, and now we play the move rook to g1. The black is having the only square to go on h3, and here we play the move bishop into f7 check. A very strong move. The opponent cannot capture the bishop because after knight g5, he loses the queen, and eventually we will win the queen. And the game as well. So after bishop into f7, black is forced to go on d8, and after king to d8, we can simply play the move rook to g3. Simply attacking the queen. The queen only have one square to go on h6. After queen h6, we play the move knight to c3, simply developing the piece. And now we have finished our development. So after knight c3, let's take a random move. I have taken a random move like knight f6, trying to develop his pieces. We develop our knight on d5, centralizing the knight. And after knight d5, if black makes any move like g6, we already have a move like bishop c1, simply attacking the queen. The queen only have one square to go, which is on d6. And after queen d6, bishop to f4 comes in, and the game is over. The queen is attacked, and if queen tries to move, we simply have bishop into f7, and the game is over. Like such a beautiful mate it is. Like I can't just you can just see. It's a very interesting way to play. And at the place of g6, if black tries to develop his pawn, you can still play the move bishop c1, and after bishop c1, the queen is actually trapped. There is no d6 square, and the queen is trapped, and we will eventually win the game. So that's it for the line of queen to g5. There is nothing special in this particular line. It's just a bad opening. So after queen g5, now let's try to discuss what happens if black tries to play the move d6. After d6, black's idea is to stop the move e5, and he wants to develop slowly like this. So after d6, we develop our knight by playing knight f3, knight to f6, developing the piece. Black's idea is to develop his kingside pieces and castle as soon as possible. We castle, bishop to e7. If black tries to be pawn grabber and he plays the move knight into e4, rook e1 is just too strong move, and you have to give up the piece. If you try to defend it by playing the move d5, we can already capture the pawn. And if you try to play the move f5, trying to protect the knight, we already can play the move knight d2. And it's just a bad position. You can't just really play it. After knight c6, takes, rook takes, bishop e7. Simply this pawn is collapsing. The game is collapsing, and there is no way black can even think of a draw. So yeah, black's only option would be to develop as soon as possible and castle as soon as possible. So after bishop e7, we strike in the center by playing the move e5 instantly. D5, like, or else there is no good move to continue the game. D5, we play the move queen b3. Obviously, if we try to trade off the queens, it would only help black. So queen b3, the idea is to attack the pawn on f7 and also putting some pressure on the pawn on e5. Maybe rook d1 ideas are there in the future. So black castle. And here we simply capture on e5. Now there is a triple attack on the pawn on f7. So the only way to defend is to play the move queen e8, trying to defend it. Rook e1, putting the rook in the same file of the queen. Knight to c6. Like I've covered two moves in this position, the knight to c6 and bishop to d6. If black tries to first play the move knight to c6, we can already try to capture the knight. Pawn takes. If you try to take with the queen, the bishop is hanging. So pawn takes, and here comes simply bishop to f6. You cannot capture with the bishop, the queen is hanging, so you have to capture with the pawn. And now simply knight d2. We have finished our development part, and after bishop f5, the black's idea is to put the bishop on g6, which acts as a defensive piece. Queen f3, already very strong move, hitting the bishop. Taking the bishop back to g6, and now playing the move h4, a very strong move. The idea is to play h5 and simply trap the bishop, so black is having the only option to play the move h5, stopping white's h5. And simply comes the move queen e3. Simply attacking the bishop, you have to move the bishop, queen h6, and the game is over. What's happening? The queen is attacked. If you try to move the queen, I can simply capture the bishop. You cannot capture the queen because the pawn is pinned. So basically, there are two threats in the position. The queen is hanging and the queen into g6 is a big threat. And black can't stop both the threats, and eventually we are going to win the game. So that's what happens if black tries to play the move knight to c6. Now let's try to understand what happens if black tries to play the move bishop to d6. Which is the best move according to the engine. We develop our knight to d2, trying to finish our development. Bishop to e6, simply knight f3. If we try to capture the bishop, black would be happy to trade off the pieces as much as possible. So we try to simply pull our knight back to f3, putting some pressure on the knight on f6, putting some... Another threat is to actually capture the bishop on e6, because the rook is also joining the party. So bishop into c4, the best move. Knight into c4, again hitting the queen. The queen have to move. Knight to d4. And the idea of knight d4 is very clever. We want to play the move knight f5, and it's going to be very interesting. Knight d7, trying to develop the pieces. Knight f5. Rook e8, trying to trade off the pieces. We simply capture the bishop. Pawn takes. We simply play the move queen to g3, threatening mate in 1. Black is forced to play g6, and now simply capture the pawn on d6. Rook into. And you can see how white's pieces are all harmoniously placed. So after queen f5, we can simply jump in with the rook on e7, trying to hit the pawn on f7. Black tries to do a counter attack by playing the move queen d2, hitting the bishop and also threatening mate in 1. So we simply have the move queen b3, defending every threat, every back rank issues, and now also there is a mate threat. Like white wants to play queen into f7 and it's mate. So black have to play knight e5, which is the only move. And after rook into e5, queen into d6, queen to c3, and I guess this position is already winning for white practically, because the dark squares are extremely weak. You can simply move the rook, put some pressure over here, maybe g4, g5, or maybe even rook e3, rook f3, simply putting the pawn on h3, and you can just simply win the game. So it's a very interesting position, and I think it's like we have already come into the 24th move, which is a very deep preparation, and it's a very interesting way to play. So this is what happens if black tries to play the move d6. Now let's try to discuss what happens if black tries to play the move knight to f6. After knight f6, we are going to push the pawn to e5. Taking the advantage of this that black has not yet played the move d6, so we can play the move e5. The knight goes to e4. There are two moves. Black can play the move either d5 or put the knight to e4. If black tries to play the move knight e4, simply bishop into f7, check. King into f7, queen d5, check. And we can simply capture the knight. We are a pawn down, I agree, but our idea is very unique. We want to put our knight to h3. Short castle, f4, f5, knight to d2. Despite being a pawn down, black king cannot castle because he have already moved. And it's going to be a trouble time for black in the whole game. And you can simply enjoy your possession, have a cup of tea, and you can just simply play. So this is what happens if black tries to play the move knight to e4. So now let's try to discuss what happens if black tries to play the move d5, which is a very solid move. We simply capture the knight, pawn takes the bishop, we trade off the queens, and now capture the pawn on g7. The only move, like the both pieces are attacked, the only move for black is to give a check on bishop to b4 check. We play the move knight c3, a very interesting way. Still hitting the rook, so the rook have to move, and now we simply long castle, giving a check. Black tries to defend, we play the move a3, a very interesting way. If we try to take, we can simply take, we are defending the pawn and we are already winning. So the bishop have to go back, we play the move knight e2. The idea of knight e2 is very interesting. First of all, we are developing our pieces, and the second idea here is, white wants to play knight d5, but white cannot because of the pawn push on c3. And eventually we have to, like after it takes, black can take here, and if we try to capture with the bishop, after bishop trade, black can simply capture on g7, which is a very annoying threat. So this annoying push is coming up, so that is the reason we first play the move knight e2 to cover the c3, and now we are fully prepared to play the move knight to d5. So black will capture the pawn on g7, or else we are going to play the move knight d5 and win the game. Rook into g7, knight to d5, trying to hit the rook. Bishop rook into g2, trying to be a pawn grabber, trying to capture a pawn. Bishop check. King to c8. If you try to play the move king to e8, already after knight e to f4, like the position is already very good. Like if you try to capture this pawn, rook g1, and threat is like nearly unavoidable, and the position is completely winning. So that's the reason you must play the move king c8, and now simply comes knight check, king move, simply playing the move rook g1, which is a very interesting move. Forcing a rook trade, and now simply threatening this rook g8 checkmate, and the position is winning. Like you can't do much. Like after knight c6, I can simply play the move knight into c6 check. Like everything is paralyzed to be true. Like after knight a6 check, I can still play the move knight c6 check, and I can simply capture the bishop as well, and we are completely winning. So this is what happens if black tries to play the move d5. So now finally we come to our last like the last move, which is bishop to b4 check, the last option for black. And after bishop b4 check, we play the move knight to c3, simply developing the piece. After knight c3, which we black plays the move knight f6, and this is the best line for black. So after knight f6, trying to hit the pawn, we simply play queen b3, trying to hit the bishop as well as the pawn. So the only way for black is to capture the knight on c3, queen into c3, short castle. So finally black have able to save his king by playing the move short castle. We play the move knight f3, d6. If like the black king, the knight cannot capture the pawn because of it's a one move mate. So d6, trying to play slow chess, short castle, knight to c6, developing the piece, rook to d1, bishop e6, and now rook u, developing all our pieces. So finally we have developed all our pieces, and now we are finally ready to break the center with the move e5. So after rook e1, black captures the pieces. As I said, that it would be only helping black if he can able to trade as much pieces as possible. Queen into queen e7, trying to connect the rooks finally, and it looks like black is having a fine position now. Black is able to control his damage, and white is having 5 pawns, whereas black is having 7 pawns. So again, black is having 2 pawns advantage. We play the move queen b3, trying to put pressure on the pawn on b7, and also provoking the push on e5. Like we want to play e5, but after e5 there are some problems with the back rank issues. There are some issues like after knight e5, d5, bishop into e5, rook a d8 is coming up, which is a bit annoying. So that is the reason what we are doing first here is, at the place of pushing the pawn to e5, we are first playing the move queen b3, trying to cover the back rank issues and giving our opponent more area, more room to make mistakes. Like the b7, we are putting pressure on the pawn on b7, we are threatening e5, so what can black actually do in the position? So after queen b3, black tries to play knight e5, trying to trade off as much pieces as possible. We play the move knight d4, rejecting the knight trade, and already preparing to play the move knight f5. Rook e8, bishop a1. A very interesting way to play. Bishop a1. We want to capture the pawn, but we cannot, as after rook b8, the bishop is hanging. So we simply pull our bishop back, and now we are ready to capture the pawn. Rook b8. We play the move knight to f5, hitting the queen. Queen e6, trying to offer a queen trade. We simply play the move queen to g3. Trying to hang a checkmate on g7. Knight to g6, trying to avoid the mate. h4, trying to play the move h5 in the future up. Rook d8. We cannot play h5 because the pawn is hanging, so we simply capture on g7. A very interesting way to play. Knight g7, simply out of the world. King into g7, now h5. The knight cannot capture because the knight is pinned up. So we are going to get a piece. The king move, we capture the piece, and we play the move queen to c3. The idea is to simply capture the knight, so knight move. If black tries to play king g7, rook e3 is already winning after rook f3 is coming up. So it's already 1-0. So black have to move the knight, and we can simply play the move queen f3. There are two ways to play the position. You can either play queen f3, or you can either capture the pawn on c7 as well. You can simply equalize the material by playing queen into c7, or you can simply play queen f3, which would I recommend. Putting pressure on black. It's not easy for black to continue the play. You are having some g4 ideas, maybe some rook left ideas, and the position is very interesting to play from the white side personally. So this was all about the Danish Gambit accepted variation, the chapter 1. If you like this video, then make sure to like the video. That's all it for today's video. If you want to, you can just play out this opening with your friends and try to just scare them. And it would be a very great help if you guys can like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel, because it helps us to motivate to make videos like this. So I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this. If you have any recommendations, any suggestion to make a video upon, you can just tell me in the comment box below. I'm surely going to reply to you, and I'm going to make a video on it. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Oneshot Chess.